At the end of the 19th century, in a remote corner of Maine, there was a village called Willow Hollow. This place, lost among dense forests, was known for its isolation and rare visits from strangers. The life of the village was quiet and measured until one summer day when a strange woman named Eleanor Baines arrived. She settled on the outskirts, where an abandoned house, surrounded by ancient willows, had long been in disrepair. The villagers immediately noticed that her windows were always drawn, and thick black smoke billowed from the chimney. Every evening, Eleanor would leave her house and head deeper into the forest, carrying a small bag. Those who tried to follow her returned empty-handed, as if their memories had been erased. No one knew what she did, but her returns were marked by a strange light in the windows of her house, as if green flames burned inside. People began to avoid her, unwilling to fall under the intense gaze of her predator-like eyes. "She's not just a stranger," whispered Mrs. Mabel to her husband in the kitchen. "She's hiding something, I'm sure of it." Weeks after Eleanor's arrival, strange events began to occur in the village. Livestock started dying under mysterious circumstances, animals were found without visible wounds, but with their eyes wide open, full of terror. Children who ventured into the forest returned pale and frightened, some bringing strange objects, wooden amulets or bundles of dried herbs. "Mom, what's this?" asked little Lizzie, holding up a strange pendant she found by the stream. The pendant was engraved with an incomprehensible rune. Her mother threw the object into the fire, but the flames refused to consume it. One night, the Wilkes family heard strange noises near their house. When they looked out the window, they saw a figure in a dark hood standing by the fence. "It's her," whispered Mrs. Wilkes, trembling as she closed the shutters. "Who?" asked her husband, not taking his eyes off the silhouette. "Eleanor. The witch." The next morning, they found a dead cow by their house, and beside it, a burned five-pointed star. The villagers gathered at the tavern to discuss what had happened. "We need to drive her out," shouted Farmer Jackson. "She's the one bringing misfortune." But that same night, a fire broke out at Jackson's house, and the whole family narrowly escaped. In the morning, they found an amulet with unfamiliar symbols in the ashes. This confirmed the villagers' fears. The village elder, Abraham Cartwright, gathered the villagers for a meeting at the tavern. The building was packed, and the air was filled with anxious whispers. At the table sat the most respected villagers: blacksmith Thomas Lawrence, miller Jonathan, pastor James, and elder Abraham. "I knew this would happen someday," began Abraham, standing by the fireplace. His voice was firm, but his eyes betrayed fear. "The legends of our village are true. Witches lived here, they were driven out, but they swore to return." "You mean this woman? Is she one of them?" asked Thomas Lawrence, the young blacksmith, clenching his fists. "I'm not saying for sure, but all the signs point to it," replied the elder. "We must be careful." "Maybe it's just a coincidence," interrupted Sarah, the miller's daughter. "We're blaming her without cause." But most of them had already decided that Eleanor was guilty. Thomas, who didn't believe in superstitions, decided to investigate for himself. The next evening, he went to Eleanor's house and knocked on the door. The woman answered, her eyes gleaming like a predator's. "What do you want?" she asked coldly. "You've scared the village. People think you're a witch," Thomas replied straightforwardly. "I've come to find out the truth." Eleanor laughed, low and echoing. "The truth? People fear what they don't understand. This isn't my fault," she looked him directly in the eyes. "Now go." But Thomas didn't leave. He was found unconscious outside the church, muttering one word, void. Several days passed, and Thomas suddenly disappeared. His friend, Hunter Lewis, tried to find out where he had gone. "I saw a light in the forest," Lewis said at a village meeting. "It was unnatural. I think Thomas went there." A group was formed, and they ventured into the forest. Soon, they found tracks leading to a strange altar, where a note was found, "Don't interfere." Near the altar, they discovered dead animals with shriveled bodies, and beside them, dolls made of twigs and hair. This sight terrified everyone. Pastor Jonathan, who had recently arrived in the village, discovered an old journal in the church library. The yellowed pages contained descriptions of ancient protective rituals. "These symbols," he said, showing the pages to Sarah, "they may help protect us. But we must act quickly." Jonathan also learned from the journal that the witch might have made a pact with ancient spirits of the forest to gain power over life and death. He realized that Eleanor was using these forces. Jonathan decided to visit Eleanor's house. He entered, and the woman greeted him with a strange smile. "What do you want, Pastor?" she asked, sitting by the fireplace. "You know what you've done," he said firmly. "I've come to put an end to this." "Are you so sure?" Her voice sounded like the whisper of 1,000 voices at once. Jonathan felt as if his feet were rooted to the floor. She began chanting, and Jonathan saw the ghostly figures of the village's deceased inhabitants appear around him. They reached out to him as if trying to drag him into the darkness. The villagers surrounded the house, armed with torches. "We have to stop her," shouted Lewis, "or she'll destroy us all." "Be careful," screamed Sarah as the roots of trees began to rise from the ground, alive. One man fell, screaming in pain as a root grabbed his leg. Lewis swung an axe and tried to free him. At that moment, clouds appeared in the sky, and a heavy rain began to fall, but the villagers' torches continued to burn, as if by magic. This inspired the people, and they began reciting prayers that Pastor Jonathan had suggested. Inside the house, Jonathan read prayers. Eleanor grew weaker with every word. Her eyes began to dim. "They won't stop me," she whispered. "My power is eternal." But at that moment, the villagers' prayers, combined with Jonathan's efforts, destroyed her. She vanished in a whirlwind of black ash. When she disappeared, a book of spells was found in the house, describing horrific rituals. There, too, was the pendant that Lizzie had found by the stream. The site of the house was left as burned earth. Jonathan left the village, leaving behind the journal. "Did we succeed?" Sarah asked. "For now," answered Abraham, gazing at the forest. "But they will return." Years later, whispers were heard once more in the forest. But the villagers knew that the darkness never fully disappears.